Most history books tell us that the Zulu king Shaka was the greatest leader the Zulu nation ever produced. They say that Shaka made the Zulu strong and that he introduced a more efficient way of leading warriors in battle, and that he invented the large, broad-bladed stabbing spear which made the Zulus the most formidable fighting force in the land. They say this and they say that, and only a quarter of what they say is true. History books also say that Dingane, or Dingane, as all history books misspell his name, was a treacherous, bloodthirsty, savage, and a lazy, sneaky tyrant who was too cowardly to negotiate openly and preferred treachery instead. This is complete nonsense. The only spark of truth in it concerns Dingane's laziness. He was a pleasure-loving man, but at no time was he treacherous, nor was he a coward. He died bravely, like a hero, without a murmur, even while tortured at the hands of the Amangwane, who had captured him. With eyes torn out and blood freely flowing from multiple wounds, Dingane still had the courage to say, with a voice perfectly under control, "Ngiyandabukela we Mangwane. I am sorry for you, oh Mangwane." He said this because he realized that they were pursuing and torturing a man already defeated and helpless, while their country was being overrun by strangers. The picture white historians paint of Dingane is not a true picture. It is always influenced by his so-called act of treachery, which culminated in the death of Piet Retief. This is understandable. We all allow our emotions to blind us to the bright sun of truth. Any man, ruled by an overwhelming love for the woman he has chosen for a wife, sees nothing but beauty in her, even though she may be a shameless adulteress. A man blinded by hatred for another man refuses to see anything good in him. Thus Dingane has been blackened out of all recognition because of what he did, and nobody has yet bothered to scrape the mask of dust from his portrait to reveal his true identity. But Dingane was in fact one of the worst chiefs the Zulu ever had. Although brave, he was very lazy, and he was effeminate, not only in appearance, but in behavior too. He was a short, fat man, little over 5 feet tall, with a pretty girlish face and a mouth like that of a woman. He had a womanly beauty which he inherited from his mother, beautiful and equally lazy, but deadly. Ngenzeni. He loved to bathe and perfume himself like a woman, and he looked upon his royal duty of inspecting and supervising the training of his warriors as boring and stupid. He loved what is known as multiple mating, even in broad daylight. That is, he took on 2 or 3 women at the same time. As a young man, he used to vomit at the sight of spilt blood, and his effeminacy was blatantly mirrored in his refusal to wear the Siqoqo ring of honor around his head. He preferred the broad ostrich eggshell band of beads, such as dancing girls used to wear. Unlike his brother Shaka, who often practiced homosexuality, Dingane was inordinately fond of women. When Piet Retief was killed, Dingane was not even in the kraal. He stood on a hillock outside the kraal, and even from there, he gave the predetermined signal and shouted,
"Kill the wizards!"
My great-grandfather Selwane Shezi, the High Witch Doctor and Chosen One in Dingane's Kraal, stood by for the signal. From him, through my grandfather, Zigo Shezi, and 2 other Chosen Ones, I received the true version of what happened in Dingane's Kraal, and I can speak with more genuine authority than anyone else. The Bantu attach great importance to their history, and we make every effort to pass the details from father to son in perfect accuracy. It is a tradition with us. We are conscious of the fact that stories thus passed down are subject to omissions, alterations, or exaggerations, and we take every possible precaution to prevent this happening. If white people could only bring themselves to appreciate this, they could develop greater faith in us and listen more carefully to what we have to teach about the history of Africa. Few of us are prepared to talk, and while I am one of these, anxious to talk for the sake of better understanding and peace in this land, I beg all those who are interested to listen. Lend me the ears of flesh and blood and the ears of your impartial souls. There is enough in this book to indicate the strictness of our tribal laws governing premarital sexual experience and the producing of illegitimate children. Bastards were strangled at birth by midwives, and girls who fell in the valleys of temptation were so ill-treated and shunned by everybody that they fled to other tribes or committed suicide. The Bantu were fanatically strict on these things, and here, as one born out of wedlock myself, I can speak from experience. The only reason I am alive to tell this story is that there were already police in Natal at the time of my birth, and they do not exactly approve of murder. But I can understand how Shaka, a bastard in more ways than one, must have felt as a child. I can fathom his terrible isolation and bitterness, and I understand completely why he grew up into a dreadful monster when he reached manhood. Nandi, the mother of Shaka, was not only a nymphomaniac, she was also willful and precocious from early childhood. One day, I shall tell in detail how it came about that this strange and beautiful woman brought life to a monster and a heretic as foul as Shaka. Nandi was formally declared an outcast of the tribe. Her disillusioned and shamed father reluctantly agreed to the expulsion of his pregnant child from his kraal. Being an only girl and the child of a chief, she was only banished and not killed, as was customary with commoners. Nandi fled to the kraal of her brother, and it was from there that she sent messages to Senzangakona, appealing to him to come and claim her as his wife and acknowledge fatherhood to the unborn child within her swelling belly. But Senzangakona had other ideas. He denied all knowledge of Nandi. He suggested that she was not pregnant at all, and that she was merely afflicted with amashaga, stomach worms. He even sent her a calabash full of purgative. If Senzangakona had admitted having mated with Nandi, he would have been handed over to the tribal avengers for execution. Nandi was cruelly treated by the people with whom she lived. They gave her no food. They made her, a princess, do all sorts of humiliating chores in the kraal. Even when her baby was born, they sent only an old woman to help her through her labor. "Your father disowned you," said Nandi to her baby as she nursed it in a cruel, lonely solitude in her drafty hut. "He said you were nothing but a stomach worm, an ishaga." Well, this is then what I shall call you, my little one. I shall name you Shaka. Shaka grew up surrounded by scorn and by hatred. Nobody spoke to him. Men spat at his feet as they passed. In a huge kraal with plenty of food of all description, Shaka had to catch rabbits to feed himself and his mother. In the loneliness of their hut, mother and son shed many bitter tears together, and as Shaka grew up, he became more and more attached to his mother. She was the only friend he had in a hostile world. At the age of 14, Shaka began to hit back at his mother's tormentors, and he laid many a boy unconscious on the ground with his knobgiri. He became as ruthless as a crocodile and as fierce as a leopard, and his attachment to his mother grew within reach of insanity. He took many an oath to avenge the insults that were heaped on him and on her. By this time, Senzangakona had become chief, and Nandi took Shaka to his father. But again, they were disgracefully treated. She and her son fled back to the kraal of her mother, her father having died in the meantime. But even here, she met hostility. Her own family was still not prepared to forgive her for her misdeed. Finally, she sought refuge in the kraal of a truly great and kind-hearted chief, the High King of Kings, the wise and sympathetic Dingiswayo, who had the courage of a lion and the mercy of a dove, and who was fired with an ambition to weld the Bantu in Natal once again into one solid nation. As the time of Malandela, Dingiswayo brought Shaka up as his own son and taught him new methods of battle strategy which he had devised. Shaka, a young man of great though warped intelligence, fathomed their future possibilities and memorized each detail. He was now obsessed with one idea. He was going to seize the throne of the tribe Senzangakona ruled, and nothing was going to stop him. He intended killing Senzangakona for what he had done to Nandi. It would take too long to relate how Shaka eventually achieved this ambition. He never succeeded in killing his own father, for Senzangakona died of fright and heartbreak when he heard that Shaka had killed Sikujana, his son, by another woman whom he had placed on the throne of another tribe, a throne which Shaka had then seized. Shaka spent the earlier years of his reign in consolidating his position in butchering all those who had ill-treated him and his mother so many bitter years previously. Shaka was terrible in his vengeance. He killed old men, babies and women, which was completely taboo in terms of the laws of his forefathers, which prescribed that only men fit to defend themselves can be killed. Women and children must always be absorbed within the conquering tribe. Shaka surrounded himself with heretics and thugs like himself, and he brought havoc to Zululand. He was a coward. It is well known to Bantu historians that Shaka never led his own armies when they were attacking strong tribes, only when attacking remnants which could not offer serious resistance. There were hundreds of such weakly organized tribes in Natal, like the Baca and the Bondo, and these he attacked and conquered with the sole motive of building for himself an empire and a reputation as a conqueror. Shaka was the first African chief to introduce foul tactics on the battlefield. A classic example was when the Ndwandwe decided to attack him because he had killed the two sons of their chief, Zwide the Lion, in an endeavor to absorb the two tribes they ruled. Shaka first pretended to attack the Ndwandwe, and then he ordered a rapid retreat to Zululand destroying all crops and livestock on their way. Then Ndwandwe pursued, thinking that he was afraid or faint-hearted, and thus they walked into Shaka's trap. They could not bring up enough food and supplies, and when they were weak and disorganized through hunger, he attacked them. This was contrary to all Bantu rules of war. The laws demanded that a battle should be fought openly and fairly by both sides, and that no foul tricks of any description must be used. Enemy supply lines must never be interfered with, and scouts are not to be killed. Shaka broke all these rules. A battle had to be an honest trial of strength and courage between the two combatants, and an enemy had to be reduced to submission only through generalship and force of arms, not through trickery. But Shaka was a born lawbreaker. His life was befouled by acts of treachery. He did not care a tinker's curse about the lives of the Zulus. He used them only as a means to a selfish end, as mere tools for the glorification of Shaka. He broke the sacred law which says no chief must ever forcefully separate a man from his wives and family. For 5 whole years he forbade men to marry to ensure undivided loyalty within his regiments. He indulged in savage acts of wanton sadism. He had an obsessive hatred of children and forbade all his wives to bear them, because he had developed the belief that a child of his would one day be the instrument of his death. He ordered his own mother, Nandi, to keep a close watch on all his wives and to ensure that they would procure abortions as soon as they turned pregnant. Nandi closed her eyes only once to this command and purposely allowed a particular pregnancy to develop to fruition, but about this I shall relate anon. Towards the end of his life, Shaka was completely mad. He suffered from shattering delusions of grandeur. He looked upon himself as a god and nursed a belief that even spears could not touch his immortality. In this belief, he was encouraged by hundreds of cunning flatterers who curried his favor. All this went to his head like poisonous beer fumes. There was only one really strong tribe within his reach, the Amahlubi, and even up to his death, he never contemplated attacking this tribe. Why is Shaka always glamorized and glorified in history books? I have a strong feeling it is because Shaka, unlike Dingane, Mzilikazi and Cetshwayo, never once offered resistance to European encroachment. He was the first Zulu chief to offer hospitality, and not the point of a spear, to men like Charles Farewell. There are only a few truly great Zulu chiefs, and they are Malandela, the common ancestor of all Nguni kings; Zulu, the son of Malandela by adoption, who founded the Zulu tribe; Cetshwayo, who fought the British at Isandlwana, Rockstrift and Ulundi, and who had the noble habit of personally consoling the relatives of his warriors who were killed in battle and bathing the wounds of those who survived; Mjokwane, the son of Ndaba, who was also a philosopher and a poet, and who was elevated to semi-godhood; Dingiswayo, the first king who endeavored to weld the Bantu of Natal into one nation along honorable lines; Dinizulu, the grandfather of the present paramount chief of the Zulus. About these and many others, I shall shortly write a whole book, The History of the Zulu Nation.